RMJ Movie Reviews back again with the continuation of my Arnold-a-thon movie reviews of the one, the only Red Heat from 1988, co-starring Mr. Jim Belushi and directed by Walter Hill. Well, Red Heat, as I've probably said before, is part of the Arnold canon, Arnold Prime. One of the movies that I was never crazy about. This was the first time that they really tried the buddy cop formula with Arnold Schwarzenegger, because he kind of did, in a sense, have like a team in Predator, and he kind of had buddies like in Running Man, and he kind of had a buddy in Commando with Ray Don Chon, and even in the Conan films he had buddies. Arnold Schwarzenegger is a Soviet cop, and at this time in the 80s there was a lot of stuff going on between the Soviet Union and the United States, and I remember sprinkles of it from this movie, and of course from Superman 4 and other little things that I had seen on television when I was like a little kid around this time in kindergarten. But I don't remember exactly what was going on. Red Heat plays on kind of what was going on between the Soviet Union and the United States during that kind of late 80s time period, and kind of plays with that a lot. So a lot of the jokes in the movie, if there was someone who was not of my age or probably my parents' age, they wouldn't get probably 90% of the lingo and the jokes and references that they're making in this film. This is 48 hours. Through and through, this is 48 hours. All the way down to the fact that you've got, it's directed by Walter Hill, and the musical score is done by James Horner, which James Horner here kind of does try to kind of recreate a little bit of that 48 hours, very rough, gritty. Red Heat does retain that feel of 48 hours and another 48 hours. The big difference with this, not to mention that it's a buddy cop film for Arnold Schwarzenegger, it's the simple fact that, as in Running Man was more kind of fantastical and very fantasy driven, and it took place in the future, Red Heat is very grounded. The action sequences are less showy and spectacle-y, and they're kind of more gritty and down and dirty. Maybe you say more realistic for what a shootout would be. You know, realism is out the door, but still, Red Heat is probably the most grounded of this type of movie that Arnold had done at that time. I love the feel of this movie. I'm not gonna rag on too much. I'm gonna get to the negatives later on, but I will say one of the highlights of Red Heat is the fact that it does take place in the city of Chicago. You feel Chicago. You feel the really bad weather that you get in Chicago, the rain, the cold, the gritty buildings, the trains that come throughout the cities. You really feel the grit of the city, and it really feels down and dirty. That this movie is way better than it should be, because for all extensive purposes, this is a by-the-numbers buddy cop movie. Edo Ross, who was in another 48 Hours, and he was in Action Jackson. He's been in tons of Joel Silver action movie productions throughout the 80s. I believe he was in the movie The Hidden too. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there. But you know, he plays the villain here, Victor, and he really plays a convincing Russian. He really plays a convincing evil Russian. On the behind-the-scenes featurettes of this special edition, which is very weird that Red Heat has a special edition, because it's like the least of the popular Arnold titles, and Prime Arnold, so I don't know. But either way, Edo Ross was saying that I guess apparently when he was in character, they actually literally like pulled him aside and thought he was a real Russian. And he's very good. He's a fantastic actor. But all the villains in this movie really feel like and look like real convict, hard street people. There is a sequence in the film that they actually shot in a real prison, and I know the producer of the special behind the scenes featurette said that I believe he went to the prison once when they were shooting. I can't remember how many days he said they shot. I think they shot for like 2 days or something, but he said that was 2 days too many for him. And when you see that scene in that prison, those are all real prisoners. I believe the gentleman who was in another 48 Hours, I cannot remember his name, but he's been in tons and tons of movies. He plays the blind prisoner. I believe he's an actor, and I think Arnold and Jim Belushi are an actor. They probably made it out there by the skin of their teeth, just being the fact that Jim Belushi and Arnold Schwarzenegger were there shooting a movie. They were probably just like, I want to be in a movie, so they probably behaved and didn't do other unsavory things. This is played completely straight. So as in The Running Man, Arnold is really kind of winking and he's saying, I'll be back. Arnold doesn't say, I'll be back in here. So there's no winking. There's no kind of satirical edge to Red Heat. It is a real... Red Heat scales back the action. So it's not fantastical. It's pretty much just guys just going bam, bam, shooting at each other. But when people get hit, they get hit. Like, they get jacked up. There's gallons of blood that fly out. They get thrown across the room. I think the only thing that's missing is they don't lose a body part, which they probably would lose a body part if you got shot with the Dirty Harry gun. Maybe like a police procedural. So you're really kind of going along with them and they're following clues, and that was very different for an Arnold picture at that time, because most Arnold pictures were more action driven, because the Running Man is more action driven and gimmicky driven and satirically driven versus Red Heat, which is like I said, a police procedural, and it's grounded, and it's just like it's an 80s version of a 70s cop movie. And this thing is littered with strong character actors. You got Peter Boyle, you have the beautiful Gina Gershon. Oh, and I believe, I don't know, she was in her mid-20s here. She's basically playing the role from Showgirls. Well, maybe this might have been her character for Showgirls, except she dies. Spoiler. I mean, but this movie's like 30-something years old. Larry, Ike Turner, Morpheus Fishburne is in this film, a very young, and I believe Lawrence Fishburne was in his 20s when he shot this film. He plays another detective in the unit with Jim Belushi, but very controlled, very stern, very disciplined. It's a far better performance than this movie deserves, and that's the interesting thing. This is a standard cop action revenge movie, but the performances are so strong and it's played so straight. Red Heat has going against it is, I hate to say it, is the fact that Arnold is in it. And at the time, Arnold was at the peak of his, action persona. So this performance is very scaled down. He's very kind of structured. He's very Terminator-like in this movie, but it's more because it's a cultural difference versus him actually being a robot. And Jim Belushi Jim Belushi is very funny in this movie. He has some very good one-liners, because basically Jim Belushi here is Eddie Murphy. And Jim Belushi really uses his Second City skills here, and he really does a lot with the improv and how he has all these politically incorrect lines. A guy gets killed and shot, and then he looks at him and he goes, oh goodness, it's a guy. And then, you see the horde of villains that get out the vehicle, and Jim Belushi goes, oh man, we got an NBA basketball team going. The weak points, at least for me as an Arnold fan, outweigh the good of Red Heat, which basically all the good of Red Heat is that you've got the gritty Chicago environment, which is all practical locations. It mostly looks like. You got the gritty weather. You got James Horner's heavy duty, just heavy gritty score, and you got Walter Hill's practical direction. And the movie is littered with character actors to bring the material to life. And you've got Arnold, who's very controlled and stoic, but unfortunately, the fact that Arnold is in it, you have a certain level of expectations. And the thing is that Red Heat does not hit that expectation. There's not enough action, and when the action does happen, it's not, I would say, large scale enough. It's very dialed down. You know, and my thing is, I don't have a problem with it being dialed down. I just wish that if they were going to dial it down, it should have been more of it. You know, and ultimately, you know, the finale with the two buses, that didn't do it for me back then when I was a kid, and it still doesn't do it for me right now. It's just like these big, gigantic buses that are just kind of just like clunky. And you know, I've never knocked Arnold's acting. Obviously, in the original Conan film, he was very rusty. Hercules, New York, of course, that doesn't even count. They didn't even use his voice in that one in some versions of it. But I will say that, you know, kind of along with Bruce Willis and even Sylvester Stallone, I think that these guys are much better actors than people want to give them credit for. You know, and I think, my personal opinion, part of that just has to do with the fact that Arnold put his mind to something, he achieved it, and I just think they're just haters out there. And Arnold doing the scream, oh, and Edo Ross, it's bad. It's not Michael Jackson bad. It's bad, like, just not well done. And I didn't like the scene. The only thing I like about that chase is the fact that Jim Belushi goes, "You're playing chicken with two buses," or whatever the line is. The bottom line is that Arnold's name is on it. You have a certain level of expectation. Red Heat just doesn't meet it. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it probably a 6.5. It's ultimately forgettable. It's forgettable. It's solid, and everybody's good. It's technically well done, but it's standard and it's forgettable. And I'm going to come with my surprise movie review on Wednesday, so you're going to have to tune in to check out and see what that is. And you're going to have to see my review of Twins next Saturday to continue my Arnold-a-thon. And if you all have a problem with that, why don't you go watch The Bridges of Madison County? RMJ Movie Reviews. I'll see you soon.